Croeso mawr I chi gyfeillion i'r genhadledd yma yn ystod cyfnod cyffrous iawn I ni yn addysg yng Nghymru. A very warm welcome to you all to this Headteacher conference. Now is a great opportunity for us to get together, stop and reflect on our journey on the curriculum for Wales and rollout since September 22. A warm welcome to the small audience we've got here today of partners and international experts who have been here as part of an earlier meeting at Cathays Park. I'm Dr Anna Bryant, the Director of Teacher Education and Professional Learning at the Cardiff Partnership for Initial Teacher Education, based at Cardiff Metropolitan University, and I'll be introducing the conference today. If you require simultaneous translation during the session, please make sure you're on the English channel. You can select the channel by toggling onto the English button on the event platform. Drwy adeiladu ar y genhadledd ddiwethaf, pwrpas y digwyddiad heddiw yw I dod ag yr holl brifathrawon ar draws ein ysgolion cynradd, uwchradd, ysgolion 39 ac ysgolion arbennig yng Nghymru gyda'i gilydd I ni glywed diweddariadau cwricwlwm Gymru ac ar y gwaith o amgylch gwella ysgolion. Fel cenedl, mae barn gyda ni
We are very proud that we and everybody across Wales come together, working with the Welsh Government and Estyn, working together in a coordinated way. Also, there's an opportunity to discuss good practice and the resources that are available to us for the curriculum for Wales.
The agenda includes 4 key contributions. Firstly, a keynote with our Minister for Education and Welsh Language. Secondly, a keynote with Owen Evans, HMI Chief Inspector for Wales, followed then by a panel discussion comprised of academics and head teachers. And finally then, we'll hear from Professor Robin Banerjee, who will provide us with some important reflections on the role of well-being in supporting progression. Throughout the session today, we'd like to encourage you to submit your questions and observations in the chat function, which you'll see below the screen on the event platform. Heb dim pellach felly,
So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to the Minister, Jeremy Niles. Thank you, Minister.
Diolch, Anna. Gwrth I ni
edrych
nôl dros flwyddyn gyntaf
When we look back over the first year of the curriculum for Wales, it must be said that your continuing commitment to the reform programme and your desire to keep the momentum has been very impressive. The last years have been extremely challenging, but however, we started the work of presenting the curriculum in a position of strength, to tell the truth, and that's because of your leadership, and we do trust you to lead us. In every part of Wales, there are great and inspiring examples of schools showing the difference that reforming the curriculum can make to learners and teachers alike. Last year, I said that the process of introducing the curriculum would take time, and all schools will only teach the new curriculum from September of this year, and only from 2026 onwards will it extend to every year in all schools. So we will support you with this work. Since I spoke to you about this last year, the Welsh Government has provided more resources, continued to bring practitioners together as part of the national network, and has published school improvement guidelines as a basis for this. But today I'll be talking about the further support that is on the way too. Again, like last year, I am glad that Owen Evans has joined me today to talk about the work of supporting education reforms. Over the last year, as our reforms take root, and that's in a period of pressure on schools and on practitioners, we have heard, in the light of experience, how we can help further. Our budget for reforming the curriculum and professional learning over the coming year, which is £35 million, is evidence of our commitment to you. And I would outline to take some further steps here today. In a period of reform, when there are so many developments and requirements, it can be difficult, can't it, to keep in view how one element relates to the other. And what is the overall vision? And what is happening and when it's happening. And then this can again be challenging when you go about planning and preparing. So this week I announced our nation's mission, standards and ambitious aspirations for all. It's a document that is a kind of a roadmap. It sets out our priorities for education, the timetable for achieving them, and the assistance also that is available. The roadmap does not include new action points, but it's important to put them all in the same place. And with timelines, I hope they will be useful. It also draws attention to my commitment to lifelong learning by giving our support to schools side by side with our support to colleges and higher education institutions in one comprehensive system. Now, I want to look at a few elements and update you on what is working and the support that we will provide. Firstly, whether it's a nursery, school, a college, university or adult learning, the priority is the same for me. Enable every learner to reach their full potential, whatever their background may be. Next week, I'll be making a statement in Parliament, in the Senedd, on our work to tackle the effect of poverty on achievements, following work in the Senedd last year and the speech I gave to the Bevan Institute. And I'll be sharing the update on this learning so you can also see what's going on. To be effective, the actions we all take must go reach the whole system. And I want to work with you to ensure that together that our method of tackling the effects of poverty on educational outcomes is more than the individual elements. Two fundamental aspects of this action method are, of course, the pupils and neighbourhood schools. The Pupils Development Grant is now at 130 million, has a key role to play. As school leaders, I believe you are in the best position to decide which evidence-based solutions will be most effective for your students. The next step on this is that we will soon publish updated guidelines for the grant to help teachers plan and use this funding in a strategic fashion. And as principals, you will know how important it is to reach out to families, communities and other agencies to provide the best possible support for learners. That's why we have invested significantly in increasing the number of family engagement officers who are employed by schools. So I can confirm they will provide a further £2.5 million to be able to increase the provision in order to engage with families. We also continue to fund the positions of community school managers in order to help schools work in partnership with their communities. And over the next 2 years, a budget of 40 million of further capital will be available to local authorities to support schools to be community schools. This fund will enable schools to create deeper links with the local community and also the families of students. Finally, in this area, as we know, it's very important to support learners with speaking and reading, and an entire school focus on this can help in a very significant way. So you will see in the next few days we will publish a toolkit for oral and reading, and I hope very much it'll be a useful resource for you as practitioners.
Colleagues, we all want our learners to benefit from high standards but also high aspirations. Every child's capacity to aspire is equal. And key to unlocking all of these aspirations is learners' progression. And the Progression Project, Camau'r Dyfodol, will shortly publish its first phase report on progression. This highlights the excellent work you have done. Progression is about the individual's journey of learning, and as highly skilled professionals, you are experts in that. But the practical lens on what this means in the classroom is essential. So what are we going to do to make sure that you have the practical tools that you need? Firstly, collaboration across schools is essential to planning progression. No school can develop their curriculum in isolation. So during the summer term, we will be working with schools to test what a shared language of progression looks like. Working in clusters is central to the success of this curriculum, and I'm heartened by really good examples that we see across the country. This has got to be a priority for all. Secondly, there are more resources on progression available now than ever before. The supporting material section on the Curriculum for Wales hub page includes guides on using the principles of progression, support for assessing learners and evaluating their progress over time, including a template for assessment design and practical ways to come to a shared understanding of progression. These are practical, simple resources that help you take progression forward in a school context and provide prompts as you develop your approach. And I encourage you to draw on these materials if you haven't had a chance to do that already. Thirdly, hundreds of practitioners across Wales have already participated in national network conversations on progression and assessment, giving them some time and space to reflect and to share approaches. So as a next step, today we are making all of our national network materials available as accessible bilingual playlists on Hub, making it easier to have those deep, engaging conversations that you need as part of curriculum co-construction. Fourthly, Camau'r Dyfodol has developed some takeaway materials for this event today, setting out what we've learnt from the first phase of the project and the implication for you as school leaders as you continue on the journey to implementation. This brings the latest research in Wales and internationally, together with the experiences of teachers and leaders. And our next step is that in the summer term, we'll publish the next release of practical supporting materials which builds on this research. And fifth, this year we also launched our pilot on understanding by design, giving schools time to practically engage with thinking on curriculum and assessment design and planning for purposeful progression in learning. And as a next step in that, we'll be publishing supporting materials based on this learning later this year. Our vision for curriculum reform is and must be inclusive of learners, whatever their needs, including those with additional learning needs. And I want to emphasise today how essential it is that curriculum and ALN reform should be seen as part of the same whole. We are seeing steady, positive progress towards implementing the ALN reforms, and we are being told that person-centred practice is now bringing real benefits. But despite this, I'm hearing about the demands, particularly on Elencos, whose role is critical to the success of these reforms, and that schools need more time to embed effective change. I know how determined you all are to get this right, and it is essential for our learners with additional learning needs that these reforms are implemented effectively. So in light of the pressures that you have been telling us about, I'm extending the implementation period for the Act from 3 years to 4 years to August 2025. And I'm also nearly doubling the funding to partners for ALN implementation. So £12 million in 2023-24 and 24-25, so that you all as heads can strategically review and invest in the resources that you need in your schools. And the learner is at the heart of all that we are doing. Earlier this week, I published some more information about the relationship between our reforms in curriculum with qualifications. We need to value the range of knowledge, skills, and experience which each individual learner has acquired when we recognise their achievements and progression. Qualifications will always be a crucial part of this, but we also know that employers and education providers want to see the whole learner and the depth and range of the skills and experiences they've had in school. And our new materials bring learner progression and achievement together with our new approach to school evaluation and improvement. I announced in January that we will work with practitioners to develop a new approach to school information and improvement, one which puts learners and learning at the centre. Reporting should be based on what matters, and we need to eliminate unnecessary reporting which duplicates or which does not genuinely add value to our learners' educational journey. I want a streamlined, coherent approach to information across our education system. Now, I know that my decision to reinstate Key Stage 4 measures based on qualification outcomes at school level has not been universally welcomed. The rationale is that this is a temporary arrangement in our journey towards a more holistic information ecosystem consistent with the ethos of the curriculum, and it will not, for reasons of timing, apply to learners learning under the curriculum for Wales. So I was keen to avoid the additional workload of introducing yet another set of measures which would be interim. Our energies need to be spent on designing what follows. So my officials are currently speaking with a range of schools, helping develop our thinking on this new information ecosystem. And as a next step, in the summer term, we will establish a practitioners group to develop more detailed proposals. And as I said to you last year, I will say again this year in the clearest possible terms, so that there is no mistaking our intentions. Under the curriculum for Wales, information about progression is about self-evaluation, not about accountability. Accountability is vital, but it is separate. We will also work with our partners across the education system to develop a streamlined approach which reduces workload, simplifies and clarifies. And separate to this, it is the right point in our reform journey for us to review the roles and responsibilities of some of our supporting partners in the middle tier to ensure, together, that they properly reflect the new reformed landscape. Schools need, of course, the very best support centred around a common system-wide purpose and shared goals in the context of a self-improving system. So we will look afresh together at how we collaborate for school improvement in the next phase of the journey. And I will share more information about how we will do this in the weeks ahead. The last thing I want to touch on is professional learning. Last year, I spoke about an offer which is coherent and accessible, as well as comprehensive. And I hope that you would acknowledge that we've made big strides since then, not least by introducing the national entitlement. Our next step now is to make sure that you can have confidence that the professional learning available is at its most current and authoritative in a changing landscape. So we've been going through an evaluation of our professional learning resources, and before the end of the summer term, we will launch a new kite mark scheme which will give practitioners the assurance they need. As you know, we've also agreed an additional National Professional Learning Inset Day for this year and the next 2 academic years. Alongside the £12 million professional learning grant, this contributes to the time and space that you need to continue on your curriculum rollout journey. And our next step is publishing guidance on how to use this time, which we will do next month. I want to stress that teaching assistants must have the opportunity to engage in professional learning as part of inset days and as part of your school improvement journey. They play a critical role in supporting learners in the classroom, and it is vital that they continue to develop their professional skills and understanding like any other practitioner. And professional learning grant allocations will in future now reflect this too. In closing, the curriculum for Wales depends fundamentally on your leadership, on ongoing review, reflection and development. And the national network conversations will continue to learn from your experiences. And the network is critical in the evolution of the curriculum, so I would encourage you to take part. It will increasingly shape the support, professional learning and resources available in responding to your reflections. I want our messages to be simple, straightforward and supportive. As all schools roll out the new curriculum in September this year, we will also review our expectations on curriculum rollout to build on what we have learnt together. If the network tells us there is need for more detail, we will develop this with you and we will ensure it is consistent with the ethos of the curriculum. This is about clarifying and refining, not about changing and extending. Well, that is what I wanted to say about our reforms. I just want to finish with a few words regarding the strike action that we've seen in Wales. I'm not going to lie, the negotiations have been difficult, I think, for us all. And you all know the position that we are in. Like your school budgets, inflationary pressures have meant the Welsh Government has less, not more, money available as well. But we have tried to use every lever available to us to help try and reach an agreement with our union colleagues. You've all faced a lot of disruption over recent years, and we want to make sure you don't see any more. So while over the border the government has spent a month refusing to even talk to unions, I hope you'll recognise in Wales that we are making progress, and I'd like to thank our union partners for that and can give you my word that I will do everything in my power to ensure that schools stay open, that disruption is minimised and that a resolution can be reached. I started by saying that you have made the best possible start to our curriculum journey, and I'm deeply proud of our achievements as a system. Reforms of this scale take time to get right, and there is further to go. But we must not lose sight of our fundamental goal. Firstly, to raise the aspirations of every child. And secondly, to help them fulfill them and to let no barrier of disadvantage stand in their way. And I'm delighted that we are on that journey together. And as our partners on that journey, I want to say to you quite simply, I trust you and I'm grateful to you for your leadership. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Diolch yn fawr iawn i'r gweinidog am yr araith yna.
Thanks to the Minister for that speech.
Pwysleisio'r nod a'r weledigaeth I sicrhau dysgu
to share with us the vision and of high quality and the commitment to lifelong learning as well, and wanting every learner to reach their potential with helping them to bridge then from the college to university.
Insightful speech. We are all encouraged to really take that space now for in-depth professional learning discussions and to be comfortable with the complexity and messiness of curriculum design and progression. Importantly, there's a range also of support practical resources that have been made available for us to support us on the journey with Curriculum for Wales. Thank you to those who have submitted their questions, and please continue to submit your observations and questions in the chat function. We will have the opportunity to reflect on them following our next keynote. Nawr hollwn felly cyflwyno un ail siaradwr gwad,
introduce you to our second speaker, Owen Evans, who's the HMI Chief Inspector of Estyn.
Diolch, Gweinidog. I'm now just over a year into post and about the same length of time since we recommenced the majority of our activities So today I'd like to reflect a little on the past year and its achievements, highlight a few areas of our focus, and then perhaps talk a little bit about the future. I've spoken about my optimism for the education and training sectors in Wales in this year's annual report, but that optimism recognises that the system still has several issues that require our collective focus over the coming years and indeed years. Before I start, though, I thought it might be appropriate to set what I'm going to say today in the context of the terribly sad news of the recent death of a head teacher after an inspection. Whilst I suspect none of us know all the facts of this sad incident, it's perhaps worth reflecting that much of what I'm going to talk about today is based on our developing approach to making the inspection process more of a professional dialogue with a focus on strengths and areas for improvements rather than relying on summative judgments. When I joined Estyn as its latest Chief Inspector, I made a commitment to listen to the sectors we inspect, and every month I have visited settings across the country that have given me the opportunity firsthand to discuss the changes we're making at Estyn. The removal of summative judgments, the increased focus on professional dialogue, including through the well-established nominee model and increasing discussions with classroom teachers, our sympathetic approach to the challenges schools face, particularly post-COVID, and the fact that every inspection is written for the specific setting and also now accompanied by an explanatory version for parents, overall have been welcomed. The fact that we've achieved this without losing the rigour that you would expect of us has been particularly significant and very welcome to me. And it is this ethos that is the core of what we do, and it's the core of what I'm going to talk about today. Making inspection a valued part of the school improvement journey and not, as the perception frequently can be, an attempt to catch you out or undervalue your efforts. And
Indeed, when reflecting on the past year, my first thoughts and those of my colleagues have been on the ongoing legacy of the pandemic and its long-lasting impact on learners and, importantly, educators. In our first full year without lockdown periods, but with ongoing local interventions, we have seen the negative impact on learner progress across most sectors, and particularly those from more disadvantaged backgrounds. We have seen the tremendous efforts of head teachers in keeping the ship afloat and continuing to focus on the welfare and development of learners. In the best schools, a sharp focus on well-being combined with a sustained focus on teaching and learning paid dividends. But many schools were slower to tackle these more classroom-based issues. I don't want to repeat all the effects here, but this recovery has put additional pressure on an education system that is already facing significant change. Two of the main areas to perhaps mention, areas that were priorities before the pandemic, but where the situation has clearly worsened since then, are equity and of fairness and Welsh language. We have seen the fact that the pandemic has worsened inequalities in areas such as skills and attendance rates. The latest figures show that there has been a particularly heavy blow on the attendance figures of pupils who are eligible for free school meals in secondary schools. But now, the gap, which is growing, is 10 percentage points between pupils who are eligible for free school meals and those who are not eligible for them. Unauthorised absences accounting for the majority of these. We know the system is trying to rectify this. We have met schools that have made great progress through their united efforts to tackle attendance. Ysgol Dyffryn is a great example, and we have published some materials on building effective relationships with parents to support equity. We have also seen impressive activities that have not had the desired effect. but it is complicated. Reversing these trends is complex, and it involves many partners and calls for new approaches, possibly, which is why we will continue to focus on how schools and their leaders tackle the effects of poverty on attainment. The Welsh language, especially in English medium schools, has suffered as learners have not had opportunities to practice the language. However, it was very pleasing to see excellent practice, and indeed it was a pleasure to invite Mrs. Sercua and the team from St Mary's School in Chepstow to the launch of an annual report this year after seeing the amazing progress the school has done with its Welsh language provision. But what is remarkable is that with such a background, the sector has continued to make progress with the main reform agendas relating to the new curriculum and ALN provision. As we have heard, the majority of schools have now moved from the first camp of the curriculum and are firmly on the early stages of it. The curriculum clearly transfers the responsibility from the state to the profession, and I welcome that. It is also pleasing to note that the sector has welcomed the transfer of that responsibility. Last year, I spoke about the opportunities these changes create to be innovative and to try new things out. And I will continue to value well thought out innovation, even if it doesn't deliver the expected results. And the chance to, with failure comes the opportunity to reflect, of course, recover and learn. Although progress towards the new curriculum is very real, it is not good where it can be improved. And based on our inspections in general, there has been progress towards the new curriculum across those schools which already use it too differently. And the main problem has been the focus many of them place on developing the curriculum at the expense of teaching and learning. And for example,
as the sector adapts to the new curriculum, of course, so must we. We welcome the publication of the Welsh Government's School Improvement Guidance, and in light of it, we've reviewed our own school improvement journey. We've revised previous thematics on school improvement and looked at our evaluations of leadership and school improvement across our work. We've reviewed and revised our information. Today have published an updated school improvement journey model, which we hope that schools will find useful. We've worked with Welsh Government to ensure this aligns well with the current policy, including the work done on the National Resource Evaluation and Improvement. The model sets out a staged overview of school improvement journeys. It aims to provide a practical guide to support school leaders and staff to reflect on their school's current position and to think about what they might do next to improve different aspects of its work. It built on our previous work and draws on the features of schools who've made rapid improvements that we've included in our annual report this year. It's a good example, I think, of what we've been increasingly focusing on, which is producing resources that are relevant and accessible to the profession. Another example is our increasing use of social media to keep people informed about our work, and also our revised approach to the annual report. When I joined Estyn, I made it clear that one of my main focuses would be on delivering greater impact through our work. Delivering more impact is not about loud voices, but it's about listening and ensuring that whatever we deliver, be it inspections or thematic reviews, are more user-friendly and accessible. An example might help. When I joined, I spent the past year speaking at conferences across the land, and the question I always ask is how many people have read the annual report? And I'm looking across at the room here today. I've got one hand up. 2, 3, 4. Actually, this is a record. The normal run rate is 1. And I think, for the amount of work we put into it, that we really needed to think about how we package the material, which I think is valuable, into a way that is accessible. So I think the response was a bit understandable. When you're busy, and we know you are, reading a 150-page tome, when you're sorting staff issues or have parents waiting to see you, isn't a high priority. That's why this year we chunked our report into smaller sections, specific to either major themes or educational sectors, primary, secondary, non-maintained and the like. We launched a summary version online in advance to make our learning available quicker and publish resources designed to support national areas for improvement. I'm glad to say that the response has been welcomed. This year, only half as many people downloaded the full document as last year, but the number of people accessing and downloading the primary report increased by 1,000%, and the number of people accessing the secondary report actually went up by 1,300%. So an example really of how we're trying to make sure that our stuff is accessible and useful to you. Our thematics are being packaged differently too, with a far greater emphasis on making them accessible to those affected. Our next publication, so you know, will be in May, an excellent paper on reading skills, and separately governors and governance. Later on this year, we'll publish our review of ALN implementation, as well as with a review of the equity of curriculum experiences for pupils who are educated other than at school. As I mentioned, though, we've also changed our approach to inspecting. The framework remains largely the same, but our approach has changed significantly. Gone are summative judgments and the traditional Thursday arm wrestle over grades. In an improvement-focused dialogue between inspectors and the school through a nominee who forms part of the team is now the model we use. Having witnessed a number of school inspections now across the nation, the value of having the head teacher involved daily as part of the team's work has been invaluable to us. As has been the role in particular of peer inspectors, colleagues who know firsthand the pressures that the sector is under. Indeed, it's an ambition of ours to grow the use of our peer inspectors. Our peer inspector training is regularly lauded by educators, and I'd encourage, if you haven't been on it, to please apply. But to those of you who have already qualified, please do come and join us on inspections. The insights you provide are invaluable to what we do, and we need you. The rigour remains, but the feedback has overwhelmingly been positive, and this is vital. For you, the sector, to value and act upon our work, it's vital that you're invested in it. Estyn, for me, should be seen in the same light as internal audit, a tool for you to reflect on your practice or to help support improvement. Our new approach has rewarded leaders who have demonstrated that they know their school's weaknesses as well as the strengths. The fact that head teachers work with us on their priorities for their inspection can only be seen as positive, I think. But we're not daft enough to think, though, that an inspection isn't going to be a challenging and intense experience. Your schools are your focus, but I've yet to meet a school leader who didn't care about the education of their learners. We also know the pressure the sector is under, which is why we're committed to a dialogue with our trade union partners to discuss workload. Top of the list for me, perhaps, is the preparation required for inspections. In a nutshell, the overwhelming consensus amongst my colleagues is that schools generally over-prepare, and I'm keen to try and make it clearer what we expect, and it's importantly, what we don't. I was delighted at a recent inspection I visited, I won't say where the head rang on hearing the good news that we were visiting, and mentioned that she was going to go skiing the week before the inspection, and debated cancelling. Our feeling, and it was only a feeling, was that look, a week of additional prep is not going to make a huge difference to an inspection. The head went. Admittedly, she did take a couple of days to ensure things were in hand, and when we visited, we found a school that had all the attributes of strong and successful leadership in practice and in a challenging area. So what of the future? Well, tomorrow I've got the pleasure of spending the day with our head teacher reference group. The purpose of the session, and something we've been trialling in various talks I've given over the past year, has been the design of our Inspecting for the Future programme for the new cycle in 2024. I think we've come a long way since Professor Donaldson launched the Learning Inspectorate back in 2018. In it, he voiced his belief that a self-evaluating and improving school sector would need Estyn to play its part. The removal of summative judgments was one of the standout recommendations, something unthinkable in years gone by. Whilst it's probably too early yet to evaluate the removal of gradings, we're currently seeing many advantages, not least the eroding of the high-stakes nature of our work, which has facilitated a greater willingness to cooperate, and this ethos will persist. The Minister has already trialled that he sees the inspection being more regular, and I agree. 6 years or even 8, as is currently the case, is too long. We know how quickly things can improve or decline in schools. If we're truly to work with the sector I'd like to see a new model where, yes, we visit and conduct thorough reviews, but that we also have the capacity to follow up with additional shorter and more supportive visits to assist with progress. Whilst these ideas are still up for debate and we're only in the foothills of discussing these with partners over the coming weeks and months, we could possibly see a model of a more focused main visit once every 6 years, accompanied by an additional engagement visit tailored to the school every 3 years to evaluate progress, good or bad. Notice would be what we deem as reasonable, and by we I mean collectively we. Not too long so that we cause undue stress, but not too short so as not to ensure that you have the information we both need to hand and allow key people, learners, staff, parents, governors to share their views. I've stated that I'd like to see us having more capacity to work with you on areas of improvement, perhaps through more targeted thematics on key issues, and even potentially being able to assist some settings in your request. But these are ideas, and we will be seeking your views, so please do engage. Hopefully we'll see that whilst the sector is on a journey of development, so are we. And I just thank you for this opportunity to speak today. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you for that speech. And giving us an update on different things about the curriculum, and messages are very kind of relevant and valid. Thank you so much to you as your audience for taking part today and for sending your questions in the chat.
Really interesting observations and questions in the chat function for the Minister and Owen. And the first question today is for the Minister. It includes, what are you doing to ensure that the professional learning to support the curriculum is of a high and consistent quality, wherever and whatever has been taught across Wales?
Okay, well, I think part of it is around the launch of the professional learning entitlement in September of last year, which I think puts a very clear framework around the entitlements of practitioners. So really keen to make sure that everybody is aware of that and making use of that across the system. And at the same time, we, working with consortia, launched a platform so that practitioners in any part of Wales can benefit from the resources in any other part of Wales. So I think that helps with the consistency. I mentioned briefly in the speech that we are working on a kite marking scheme, which will look differently depending on the kind of PL we're talking about. Some of it will be national, some of it will be local, but and we'll be working with obviously with partners, universities, consortia, local government and so on, to make sure that there's a consistent process for doing that. And I very much hope we'll be in a position to launch that before the summer term is out. It's really important, as well as having what I think is a very comprehensive offer, that we have then one that is easily navigable, and that people know, people who don't have that much time to spend looking around for resources know where they can find really high quality material. So I'm hopeful that by the summer term we'll have something more to say.
That'd be excellent, because the professional learning is key, isn't it, and critical
Absolutely.
throughout the whole of this journey that we're taking throughout the Welsh education reform, really.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you very much. Owen, Estyn has recently included reference to learner independence in recommendations from primary schools. What does Estyn suggest then is good practice for developing independence?
That's quite a loaded question.
It is just a bit, isn't it?
One of the big things that I'm always quite keen about is that we don't point a finger at one type of practice. I visited a number of primary schools where they're trying to engage with pupils, particularly as part of their education, and what's actually taught within the curriculum. And I think in the best practice I've seen, it's where the teachers have really created that atmosphere where the pupils feel their voice is heard. And I think, although a number of schools have done it in different ways, that the stand out from where I've seen it work in schools, and where colleagues I suspect have seen it work as well, is where the pupils feel valued and engaged and part of what's delivered there. And I think this is part of the ethos of the curriculum, that the beauty of the curriculum is that you can get down and actually deliver things that are relevant to the local learner. So as far as I'm concerned, the biggest thing for me has been where those learners have learned to have their voice. And I think through voice comes independence.
Absolutely, that pupil voice is crucial in all of this, isn't it? And that child-centred approach really that we're adopting through the Curriculum for Wales. So absolutely, yes. We have another question that's come in now through the chat. What in particular is the government and Estyn doing to support head teacher and staff wellbeing?
Well, well-being, I think, is so central in schools, isn't it? But it's very often focused around learner well-being as the organising principle in many ways of the new curriculum, but also a priority that we've all got, including in particular after the last 2 or 3 years, which have been so challenging for learners, obviously. So the discussion we've had over the last few weeks with teacher unions in relation to workload have essentially been conversations around well-being. And so I think we've all learned from each other quite a lot over the last few weeks about what is possible. So I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to I'm absolutely certain we will be able to make good progress in relation to that. We've also, over the course of the last few months, increased significantly the funding that we've made available to the Education Support charity, which provides specific school-level support for heads and teachers and teaching assistants. The experience that we've had from that is, for schools that have actually taken up the offer, they have had a really good experience of it, but it just hasn't been taken up by that many schools. So by extending the funding, there'll be significant extra capacity. So I think that will hopefully help as well.
Okay, off.
But it's vital to us. We care. And I think, there are some things we've done already which are de-stressing the system. The removal of summative gradings is one. The nominee model, I think, has worked particularly well, where a head teacher is involved early in the discussions that we have, is part of the team. It gives the chance to give evidence every day, and it really is part of the process that happens. But I think actually there's a challenge for us and there's a challenge for the system. I still know, and I recognise that there is a dread when you get the phone call on Friday that Estyn are coming in. And it's going to take a little while, I think. It's interesting, I speak to a lot of heads who've been through previous rounds of inspections and can remember some occasionally fairly brutal inspections. But I meet an awful lot of heads at the moment, and I'm meeting a lot of people who've been through the current round of inspections. And they're very positive about them, overwhelmingly. And the mantra I always use is if it's good, tell your mates. If it's not, tell me. And I think one of the big things for us is to get over to the sector that you don't need to fear an Estyn inspection. It is part of that journey of school improvement, and we're there to work with you to highlight the areas from our experience of working across schools of what works and what doesn't, and areas to improve on. So I think this is something that's going to take time, but well-being is really, really important to us.
And everything, it takes time to change that culture, isn't it? But it's celebrating that opportunity, I guess. So
it is, and the skiing example seems, an odd example to give, but I welcomed it. The fact that we're coming in there, we should be seeing what's going on. I don't want to put you under pressure. We're not there to catch you out, and I think this is part of the messaging we're trying to get across.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi. Mae'r cyfle heddi gallu cael y cwestiwn ag ateb wedi bod yn hynod o werthfawr. A fi'n siŵr bod y cynulleidfa i gyd wedi gwerthfawrogi hynna. So diolch yn fawr iawn Gweinidog ac chi Owen hefyd. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda now. Croeso cynnes, a warm welcome now to our panel today. And the panel is comprised of academics and head teachers. And this includes Professor Graham Donaldson, Professor Dame Alison Peacock, Gethin Davies, Prif Athro Ysgol Dyffryn Conwy, Ed Jones, Prif Athro Pencoed Comprehensive School, and Michelle Jones, Prif Athrawes Lansdowne Primary. So thank you firstly to you all as a panel. Really looking forward to the panel discussion today. I think our first question, I'd like to start the panel discussion today with a really generic question on how are things going? How is the rollout going? And if we really adopt a strength-based approach to the Curriculum for Wales, what is working well for you? And perhaps we'll start with our head teachers and then we'll move on to Alison and Graham.
Wel, da ni yn Ysgol yn Gogledd Cymru sydd wedi cychwyn ar y daith.
North Wales, we are on this journey. Certainly we see it as a great journey. Year 7 is an excitement. And part of this new thinking is very exciting for us. We kind of new experiences. Certainly it's a long journey, got a long way to go. Certainly as a school, it's, as I say, it's going to be very exciting. And for our staff too, that we're looking forward to the next step.
Mae'r cyfnod cyffroes na, that exciting sort of notion is crucial, isn't it? We are, really fortunate here in Wales to be part of something really exciting, and to hear that coming through from the pupils, it makes it all worthwhile, doesn't it? So, yeah.
For me, I think as a rollout, it's probably asked of us more questions than perhaps we thought initially. And I think what's really important is that we ask, why are we doing this for our learners? Why are we doing it for our staff, and why are we doing it for our community? And I think, yes, there is excitement, as Gethin has said, but really for us, the Curriculum for Wales creates a framework. And for me, this is a curriculum for our school that we work within the Curriculum for Wales framework. So what are the experiences that our learners need? And I think alongside that, you talk about curriculum, but the professional learning, the pedagogy is so important. So for us, it's the full engagement of staff and allowing that teacher agency, but also that leader agency, and allowing our staff to lead the rollout, allowing them space to try things out. We're not going to get it right the first time, but ensuring that we are creating some excitement, I think, amongst our learners, amongst our parents, and amongst our staff, which I think is really important. Sometimes we forget about that. It's a really exciting once-in-a-career opportunity for so many of our teachers to engage in a new curriculum.
Of course it is, and I think some of the things I'm hearing there in terms of the importance of the integration, in terms of the curriculum, pedagogy and assessment and all of this, and how that really sits hand in hand with the professional learning, which you've heard. So.
Absolutely, and I think it's given us an opportunity to reflect on our practice and to really get to know our learners and design a curriculum that fits our communities, particularly in Lansdowne, a very diverse community there. So it's been really good for us to reflect on our practice and look at a curriculum that meets the needs of all of our learners within the community.
Can you give an insight there, into the types of the diversity that you're dealing with, and...
Yeah, well, we've got 42 languages. We've got 57% minority ethnic. We've got approximately 40% of our pupils we class as vulnerable, 11% of those with additional learning needs. 62% of our pupils speak another language other than English at home. So I think for us, although we have very good relationships with our communities, we've really been able to get to know our children and ensure that what we're delivering them is, as already been mentioned today, high aspirations for all, and that equity is seen across the curriculum for all of our learners.
Of course, and that equity and the social justice sort of agenda is so important to us all, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And I think what you mentioned there, and we've already heard, is that space for reflection as well, for us to sort of reflect, why are we doing what we're doing? Often we just carry on, but this has given us the opportunity, to put the purpose at the heart of what we're doing within our own context as well.
Absolutely, and I think also to put trust in our practitioners as leaders, to trust them that they do know their pupils and they are designing a curriculum that is relevant and purposeful for them.
Great. Just wondering, what are your thoughts coming in, Graham and Alison, on what you've heard so far, and what are your observations really, on how things are going?
Well, I'd just like to congratulate you really. I observe what's going on in Wales with envy from across the border. And certainly in terms of Estyn's decision to remove grading, you may have realised we've had some quite difficult issues in England in the last week with Ofsted. I was contacted just today by a head teacher who told me not that she'd been skiing, but that she'd stayed in her school on the day that her mother died so that she could see the inspection through. So I think that's symbolic, really, really powerfully symbolic of what you're doing in Wales. You're shifting things that perhaps previously we thought couldn't be shifted are being shifted. So it's curriculum, it's assessment, it's that accountability agenda, I think there's a long way to go, but you're on a very powerful path.
And of course, it's really important to just to hear that excitement, really, you know, when we're in the middle of things and developing our things are hard day to day, you know, to feel we're really privileged here in Wales as well. So, yeah, Graham, do you...
Yes, one of the questions that I'm frequently asked is, with successful teachers back in 2015 and where we are now in 2023, how do I feel about the way in which things have developed over the course of the last 8 years? And the big response to that is that I think if I'd been offered back in 2015 where we are now in Wales, I would have grabbed it with both hands. Because I sometimes think colleagues here in Wales don't really fully appreciate just how ambitious and how exciting what's happening in Wales really is, and how that's been sustained over a long period. I mean, my experience, which goes back a long way, I have to say, but my experience of reforms is that you often get a burst of enthusiasm, and then somehow or other that enthusiasm diminishes. And then what actually happens in schools is a pale reflection of what was originally intended in the reform when it started. And that was why in Successful Futures, half the recommendations are about curriculum assessment, and half the recommendations were about what needs to happen if this curriculum and assessment is actually going to take root in our schools in a way that is best for young people. That is about professional learning. That's about leadership. That's about accountability. And there's a whole queen of recommendations around all of those areas. And what really has really impressed me is the extent to which that the way in which the process has developed to date has stayed true to that original philosophy which was accepted, that placing trust in the teaching profession in a very, very direct way, in the classic yes minister way. It's very brave, minister, to provide that kind of trust, to surrender the illusion of control which was there previously. It wasn't an illusion, but the illusion of control that was there previously, and to place a faith in colleagues across Wales to actually engage in a very radically different way of thinking about how to ensure that our young people get the best possible experience in school and are really well equipped to thrive in a world that almost by the minute is becoming more and more bewildering for somebody of my age.
Yes, yeah, that's really refreshing for you. You can still see that excitement that's apparent, over the last 4 years. So that's I guess is important as well. So and I guess
can I just make a point? Just I don't want to talk too much, but picking up on what over the last two or three weeks we've become increasingly aware of is just how powerful artificial intelligence already is and is going to be. And I mean, my own view is that with a relatively short period of time, the nature of artificial intelligence and the developments in the digital world is going to transform learning and teaching. We cannot be exempt from that, and we need to address that. And Wales, I think, is in a better position than many countries because we're thinking about purpose. We're thinking about the purposes of education, and therefore artificial intelligence can be absorbed and taken account of within purposes that we're already agreed on. Many other jurisdictions are going to find it much harder to think about the implications of artificial intelligence. So I think Wales is in a strong position, again, to move forward into whatever the next wee while is going to bring.
Yeah, and I guess reimagining, we're in a good position to reimagine that curriculum in preparation for what the next generation has to offer here. And I think we've heard earlier today, we're all aware that curriculum is complex, it can be messy, and it's fine to have, it's okay to have those discussions, isn't it? And having that space, it's not straightforward, we're aware of that and the challenges. Just moving next to think, what are some of the challenges that you've come across then, on your Curriculum for Wales journey so far?
Wel, dwi'n meddwl un o'r sialensau sydd yn amlwg.
So one of the things that are obvious, get teachers,
Ac yn sicr mae'n
and certainly it's
ond dwi'n meddwl bod ni hefyd fel
in terms of
mae 'na nifer
in terms of projects working as they should. There's a bit of and there's grants available. So certainly in the Welsh language sector, there's a problem with staffing, and then you have to ensure that there are teachers coming into the profession. And what's better than a new curriculum that's going to encourage people to work in the sector?
A mae'n rhywbeth i ni'n tymlo yn aga, within the National Teacher Education, that we're very aware of that recruitment. We are fortunate that there are many Welsh Government schemes that are supporting that recruitment, particularly within specific areas of needs, the Welsh language, the minority ethnic. And that's so important, isn't it? But it's us as a profession, as you say, what are we doing as a profession to give the best image? And we've got the best possibility with the curriculum for Wales, at the heart of that. So that's one of the challenges, I guess, for you, to get the best people in there and get the good people through the door. And
for me, really, the challenge is time for that dialogue and for that professional discussion, because this is a really complex thing that we're putting in place. And, it's the curriculum, it's the pedagogy, and increasingly we're talking about progression and assessment. And I think finding that time for dialogue is really important, but also it's the ownership, and it's the ownership of staff. So, after Easter, we're hoping to have an inset day where I think every member of the school leadership team has to be confident that they can talk about curriculum and about progression and about assessment, about professional learning, that our AOLE leads are confident. But also, I think what's really exciting for me, that so many of our new teachers and NQTs have said, I'd like to deliver something on how we integrate literacy into this aspect, of how we develop creativity or sort of cultural sort of capital into our curriculum, how we develop Cynefin, and those sort of concepts, and the fact that everyone feels they've got a contribution within school and that their voice is heard and is having an influence on our journey to developing our curriculum.
Yeah, and what you mentioned there is that obviously some of our new, teachers are newly qualified. They are some of our agents for change, and then it's lovely to see how you're tapping into them, making the most of that. They're coming out of initial teacher education with a research-informed background. Yes, they haven't got perhaps the classroom experience yet, but then how can, it's making the most of the resource you've got, isn't it? So
we're fortunate to have an NQT with us this year, and she's very enthusiastic, she's very motivated, she wants to be very much part of the school, and as you've said, she wants to implement her own thing as part of her professional standards, and I think that's been a real positive shift. Some of the challenges we've faced with our curriculum rollout and design really has been the turnover of staff, as you've alluded to. We had 5 new teachers, new deputy, so it's been revisiting our vision and what it is we want for our curriculum, so that all staff are engaged and we can all travel together on that journey as we move through the process, really.
And it is keeping that shared knowledge, when people do progress as well, keeping that. How can we be creative with that time and space as well, professional learning discussions?
And building confidence. Yeah. I think staff have lost a lot of confidence over the last few years, particularly going through the pandemic and coming back in and then taking ownership of their areas of learning and being able to share their experiences and their skills and their knowledge with the rest of the staff, and it's empowering them to do that.
Okay, great. I mean, have you got any thoughts, in terms of perhaps some of the challenges you've observed? Graham or Alison, or
I think it all comes down to professional learning and to creating a culture where, we're just grown-up children, aren't we? So how do we make sure that we enable all of our colleagues to become genuinely involved in the learning conversation? And there are no silly questions. There are no kind of periods of time where you think, what are we doing again? We all need to be able to help each other. And I think. Now, I've been involved over a number of years with this initiative, and increasingly, every time I come to Wales, I'm impressed and I'm envious. I think you're doing a great job.
Let's having that time and space. The questions are great, critical questions, or even silly questions. Let's have the confidence. Let's ask them, because it's better than them just being going around because somebody else is probably thinking those questions as well. So, Graham, any thoughts or?
Probably two challenges. One, as I alluded to earlier, there will be a challenge in staying the course. There will be a challenge in terms of the inevitable, pressures of the moment. Not through any conscious decision, but just bit by bit, knocks things off course, and suddenly we find we're in a place we didn't want to be. So one big challenge is to stay the course. I think the other challenge, and it's partly where we are just now, I think, is not to let the curriculum get in the way of good learning and teaching. What we mustn't do is overcomplicate all of this. At the end of the day, the most important decisions in education are taken by teachers in classrooms on a day-to-day basis. And what we need to do is to ensure that as all of the stuff that surrounds a new curriculum is thought through, and there's a lot of complexity there, what we don't end up with is something that is so complicated that teachers are spending all the time worrying about the stuff that lies behind it, and not about the nature of the young people that are in front of them in the learning and teaching process. And that's not easy. Yeah. But I mean, the discussion that we had this morning before coming to this conference was exactly in that territory of how we think about complexity, but not overcomplicating it, and how we keep our eye on the ball of the young people and that relationship in the classroom, which at the end of the day will determine success or failure.
Great, thank you. And just final thought, any key messages to the audience? Perhaps one or two people might want to come in.
I just think it's important that we are all on a journey, and as schools, we're all at different points of that journey, and that's okay. And it's important that we draw on each other's strengths and experiences, and we start sharing the good things that we are doing and learn from others.
Yeah, I think as well, do little well. Don't worry too much about the gaps. For us, I think in the secondary phase, to reflect on how year 7 is going, how that influences, the next building blocks for year 8, and to think ahead, to year 9, where we're going in terms of, qualifications. I think as well, there's an exciting word, isn't there? It's the skills and knowledge, but it's experiences. And I think, are we really planning experiences? And will our learners, when they go into a classroom, feel this is different? Do our teachers actually think this is a little bit more exciting? And have I got that little bit of freedom, that little bit of time, that little bit of space? And just to enjoy it. I think, we've all gone into teaching, hopefully to enjoy being with young people, to deepen their learning, to deepen their skills, we come back to the 4 purposes, don't we? And so we want that to happen. But at that same side, I think that excitement now of reprofessionalising, if that's such a word, our teachers to actually enjoy talking about being a teacher in a school, and actually have that excitement about sharing practice. So I think, yes, a really exciting time ahead. But it's a 10-year journey for all of us, I'm sure. And excited, I think, and get excited about it. And if you can't be excited as the head, how can you expect your learners to be excited about it? How can you expect the staff? How can you expect your parents to be excited?
Well, just on that note, thank you very much to you as a panel, for a really rich and really exciting, discussion today to bring in, the curriculum for Wales to life. So, diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd. We'll move to the next item on the agenda. So, warm welcome now to Professor Robin Banerjee, Head of School of Psychology at the University of Sussex. Today, Robin will talk about enabling progression through well-being. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. It's lovely to see you all here. I have some slides, and I wonder whether they can be visible to everybody. Was that all right? I can only see myself on the giant screen. Oh, there we go. Okay, fantastic. Can I just check that colleagues can see everything all right?
Yeah, that's great, Robin.
Fantastic. Great. So let me just make a start by saying a little bit about my background. So I'm a developmental psychologist. I'm a head of psychology at University of Sussex, and I've been working with colleagues in Wales for quite some time in the build-up to curriculum for Wales. I think there's a tremendously exciting opportunity ahead for all of us as we get going with the rollout. And to me, this point about enabling progression is a really, really significant one. And I think I mean, obviously I'm biased, I'm a psychologist, but I really do think that the psychology of child development is very, very crucial here. Now, as a psychologist, I'm coming from the perspective very much of focusing on mental health, but I also want to emphasize here that there's something about being ready to engage with the broader challenges of learning. And what's really helpful as a turning point for all of this is this second point on the slide here, which is social relationships. Social relationships are obviously crucial to young people's mental health and well-being, and indeed to all of our mental health and well-being. Mental health is situated within a context that is social and deeply emotional in nature. How we get on with others makes a massive difference to how we feel. And that might seem really obvious, but it's really fascinating that when you're actually working in the school context, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking about mental health as a very individualistic phenomenon. So the task becomes almost which children have mental health issues or difficulties or problems, and what are we going to do to fix those children? And you know what? The interesting thing is that actually, when you take a socio-relational perspective, you realize that actually the unit of analysis probably isn't just the child, as if the mental health is just a dispositional quality of that individual child. It's more about the context. Are we getting the context right? Are we actually ensuring that the environment for learning is right? Because the environment for learning, in an optimal sense, is also an environment for mental health. And this is why, once you take the socio-relational perspective on mental health, you begin to see that this stuff here, mental health and social relationships, is fundamentally connected to the things on the bottom of the slide here, academic engagement and achievement outcomes. It's all about putting these together. Sometimes it's very easy when you're working in a school environment, I know this very well, it's very easy to see this, working on mental health, issues with relationships, as being somehow peripheral. It's got to be done, but it's just a few children or a few young people who need support because they've got issues. And you see it as kind of distant from academic business of schools. You see it as distant from achieving, from learning outcomes. And actually, one of the great things about Curriculum for Wales is it puts all of these together, because the research makes it very, very clear that actually, once you take a socio-relational perspective, all of these things come together. I have done a lot of work over the years focusing in particular on peer relationships. So I wanted to just give you a snapshot. Those of you who've seen me present before will know that I do a lot of work where I try to do some visual representations of social networks within a classroom. This is a Year 5 class. The names are made up, but this is a sociogram. It's a visual representation of the relationships between children at a given point in time. This is a Year 5 class, so 9 to 10 years old, and you ask the children, who do you most like to hang out with, to spend free time with, to play with, okay? Those are the sorts of questions that are used to generate these sociograms. And you can see some children like Nadia here, loads of nominations, loads of people want to hang out with her. That's what all these arrows indicate. But then you look at Rio here, and he nominates 3 children, Nathan, Joseph, and Chris. Not one single one of them nominates him back. And actually, when you do the work on this, you realize that actually you've got a situation where Rio's really having a tough time in school at the moment. Now, this is just a snapshot of time, a snapshot in time. It's just a moment in time. And of course, relationships change. Sometimes within a day, relationships change. But sometimes patterns become entrenched. And this pattern can be very influential in terms of children's readiness to progress. So when you think about enablers of progression, you've got to be keeping an eye on the relationships that the children have with each other, as well as with the staff in the school, and what their knock-on effects are for their well-being. Now, way back in 2016, we actually did a piece of work for Welsh Government where we looked at the whole enterprise of relationships, well-being, resilience, promoting mental health in school settings. And it's very interesting because very often you end up focusing in many schools on this. Individual pupils who might need some help, maybe seeing them in small groups, but the focus being very much on specialist staff and services. It might be counselors, or might be therapists or clinicians, in order to address those individual pupils' needs. But look at everything else. When you're looking at social and emotional learning, emotional health, difficulties, problems, actually that's not just about individual kids, it's about the whole school setting, the whole classroom. It's about school systems and climate of the school, and it's also about the pedagogical approach. This isn't just about what happens in a PSHE class or an RSE class. It's not just about what happens in circle time. It's actually what we do in the bread and butter of school life. Good teaching and learning seen through the lens of well-being. So I really want to emphasize this point. There is a reciprocal loop between relationships, well-being, and participation. And these three work together and they influence each other in a constant loop throughout children's lives. And to be honest, we're in that same place now as adults. It doesn't change once you come out of school. But we need to remember that this is happening in school as well. So if we're talking about fostering children's progression, we need to recognize that this is behind the scenes. And yes, sometimes we'll recognize it as like it pops out because you've got a young person who's in extreme distress or is being extremely disruptive to others and disrupting their own and others' learning. And of course, that's when it becomes very obvious that we need to do something about that child. But actually, I want us to be thinking much more about the curriculum as giving us a really fantastic opportunity to work with this dynamic right from the outset. Evidence base is very strong. There's work in Wales, there's work in England, there's work all over the world, actually, which shows us. I've just picked this report way back, 2014 Public Health England report. And this is a direct quote from page 4, the executive summary at the beginning. And the evidence is very, very clear. Pupils with better health and well-being are likely to achieve better academically. Social and emotional competencies are associated with greater health and well-being and thereby better achievement. Culture, ethos, and environment of a school influences the health and well-being of the pupils and their readiness to learn. And don't even make the mistake of thinking that this is just about what's going on in the head, because actually there's a link with physical activity level as well. So physical health, mental health, academic learning, all of it comes together, and it's everybody's business. It's all of us working in the school environment together. One of the things that I really like about the curriculum for Wales is that it positions health and well-being as one of the 6 core areas of learning and experience. And it does the same for expressive arts. And I thought you might be interested to see the work that we've been doing most recently on what seems to be making the difference to engage young people who are often quite hard to engage in the creative arts. And this is a very interesting piece of work. I mean, a couple of studies recently where we focused on inclusive music projects, which were seeming to engage otherwise quite marginalized young people. And these were the things that we identified as key ingredients. I thought you might be interested to see this. Self-expression and exploration, freedom of choice, validation of competence, but with appropriate challenge. So this is not about saying everyone's wonderful and keeping everything very easy and not challenging. Actually, challenge is really important in order to validate the competence. And then last but not least, the social bonding and the community building was really important as well. And I guess the challenge for all of us working in school settings is, what can we do to make sure that these qualities, which seem to be making a difference to engaging young people in creative arts settings outside of school, what can we do to bring those ingredients out within a school setting? Sometimes the system, put that in quotes, the system seems to constrain us and it feels like we don't have the capacity to be able to do the things that we want. Well, now's the chance for all of us to do that. The curriculum for Wales gives us that license to be able to really rethink how we enable progression by putting the right conditions in place in the everyday environment of learning. And to me, that's a really important point. I'll just end by saying that this goes hand in hand with the work on whole school approaches to mental health. And I know this is very prominent in Wales, it's very prominent in England at the moment. We've been doing a piece of work focused on whole school approaches to mental health. And to my mind, this is just as much about the academic curriculum as it is about trying to sort something out with mental health issues. To me, we're doing the same thing. These were the things that we found. This was a best practice review that we published in December 2021, and we're now doing the second phase of the work. But already, from the best practice review, where we worked with lots and lots of schools in different regions of the country, these were the key ingredients which needed to be in place. Groundwork to build relationships between all the different stakeholders. Staff professional development with a systematic and programmatic approach. Staff well-being being a central foundation for being able to engage with all the young people in a way that supports mental health. This point in the middle here, integrating mental health into the curriculum, not just for the well-being team, not just for the pastoral team, not just for PSHE or RSE, it's everywhere, all the time. How do we make sure we look at all of our basic pedagogical practices through the lens of supporting mental health? Because in my view, that's what's critical for enabling progression. And then, of course, these other points, engaging all the different stakeholders involved, making sure that we're engaging with parents and carers, making sure that we're engaging with all the staff in the school, engaging governors, engaging people in the community, and partnership work with all the different services. It's a hugely complex task. It's not going to happen overnight. There is no silver bullet. It takes time, it takes energy, it actually takes quite a lot of emotion as well. But this is the opportunity when we can actually invest in it. The last point I just wanted to end with was also to say that data is really important. You probably know I would say that because I'm a researcher. We collect lots and lots of data, but it's one of the things we've noticed in our best practice review. What schools were doing were not just collecting data, but analysing it and using it to inform their practice. There are lots of resources out there, and I'm sure through the Welsh Government resource packs, there will be opportunities to actually signpost to different data collection resources. These are going to be invaluable because you're using a strong evidence base to develop ways of working which are going to support mental health and well-being, support relationships, which then foster young people's participation in their own learning so that they become agents of their own educational journey. To me, that's what's really exciting about this process. It's a really exciting point to be at now, rolling out the curriculum for Wales, and I'm really excited to see what happens going forward. So you can see, I'm talking about excitement a lot because I think there genuinely is a lot to explore together, a lot of new avenues to explore together. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Robin, for some really great food for thought there in what is really such a pertinent area for us all, the well-being and whole school approach to well-being when it's everybody's business. You've provided us with some useful insights into the relationship between the social and emotional and how that relates to academic engagement and outcomes, and through what is also used in the research and what the evidence base is telling us, and I guess how importantly we can use data and schools use data to analyse and inform thinking the best next steps forward as well. So thank you very much. As some final remarks then, I'd like to invite the panel for any thoughts and reflections on Robin's sessions and any other final reflections perhaps on the conference today. So, I don't know.
I think tapping in on what Robin said there, I think it's key what he's mentioned about the expressive arts, about health and well-being. We do so much in school, and there's always the focus that's essential about literacy and numeracy and the digital competence. However, personally, as a musician myself, I also see the importance in the arts and how the arts can contribute to the health and well-being of our young people. A happy child will also always learn, better than a sad child, and the reality is we have to give them the variety of experiences and give them the wealth of opportunities. And what he said there, their well-being and our staff well-being also, making sure our staff are healthy and ready for the workplace is an essential aspect of what we want to develop through this new curriculum.
Of course, what you mentioned there resonates very much with our culture and, in terms of the singing, the dancing, dawnsio gwerin, the folk dancing. It's an important part of that well-being, but also the context of who we are as well, So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, dwi'n meddwl bod lles a tegwch yn hanfodol. Yn enwedig wrth rwy'n ceisio cael bwlch o ran cyrhaeddiad rhwng falle y plant fwyaf difaintiedig.
A
dyna pam dwi'n credu mae yna gyfleoedd enfawr o ran datblygu a gwerthfawrogi diwylliant. A rhywbeth sy'n hanfodol sy'n rhan o natur ni fel Cymru.
In our nature, isn't it, as well?
Bod gyfle posib, bod ni'n darllen hanes ni, bod ni'n darllen treftadaeth ni. A bod plant yn teimlo perthyn, a mae
feel that they belong.
I ddatblygu'r cysyniad yna o berthyn.
It's important to
encourage o ran
that feeling
diwylliant bob un
belonging.
O'n disgyblion ni. Yeah, so I just think equity now is going to be so important. And if the curriculum, you talk about the ALN reform, you talk about curriculum and ALN reform has to support equity, and we have to create an education system that provides the best education for all of our learners, regardless of the starting point, regardless of their background, regardless of whatever barriers they might have to their own learning.
Absolutely. You know, that Cynefin you talk about there, and the link, you know, in terms of things like the whole school, the Eisteddfod and things, you know, how that links to well-being, but of course how it's important that we celebrate everybody's, you know, background and you know, there's equity there as well for everybody.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, particularly in schools in my cluster, we're very multicultural. Next Thursday, as part of our school community, we're celebrating Ramadan, where we've invited all the community in to learn about Ramadan, why Ramadan happens, Eid, and we're going to be breaking the fast as a school community to educate not just our children but our parents as well, and we're really looking forward to that opportunity next Thursday evening.
I loved what was said about challenge. I think children absolutely love to be challenged. Not to the point where it's eye-wateringly difficult, but that level of challenge which you can, you know, you really engage with something and then you have a real sense of satisfaction when you achieve it. Low-level activity that's so-called fun isn't really fun. It's how you engage with challenge. So I love what was said there. I think that really does link with well-being, with agency, with, you know, mental health, being buoyant. So that was great.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that point. I think that is so important. I mean, sometimes the accusation is laid at that things like the curriculum for Wales, that somehow it's a dumbing down curriculum. It's quite the reverse. This is, to do this well, is really challenging, and part of that is that young people get the buzz from engaging with difficult stuff, and sometimes managing it, sometimes not, but learning from it. Just 2 quick points. Health and well-being and expressive arts are right at the heart of Curriculum for Wales. So there isn't a core curriculum and the rest. You know, quite deliberately, the curriculum values all of those components. And just building on the point that was made earlier, I think the experiential gap is at least as great and contributes to the attainment gap. So I think the poverty-related experiential gap is a very important matter for us to address. And again, the nature of the new curriculum in Wales provides that impetus, I think, towards thinking about how we ensure that young people are getting the kind of rich experience as they grow up, which they won't always get from their own backgrounds. And that's a very important part of the total process.
And then expressive arts and health and well-being have got a lot to contribute to those enriching experience for all children and, you know, young people. But absolutely. Well, thank you very much to you as a panel. Ag I gloi felly, diolch yn fawr iawn i'n holl siaradwyr gwadd heddiw,
to all our
y
speakers
panel ac I chi fel y cynulleidfa.
And to you,
A big
the
thank you
audience.
to all our keynotes today, the panel and the audience. A recording of the session will be available shortly and will be shared via disc, and the resources from Estyn, the National Academy for Education and Leadership and the Welsh Government are all available on the conference platform today. So I gloi felly, diolch yn fawr iawn I chi heddi.
Thank you so much to you.
Mae wedi bod yn hyfryd I bod yn rhan o'r gynhadledd yma. Diolch yn fawr.
Conference. Thank you very much.